When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I remember that moment so clearly. The kitchen clock was ticking. It was exactly 10 minutes past 8 in the morning. The tea I had just made for her was still sitting on the counter, getting cold. She didn't even look at it. She just stood there, blocking the doorway with her arms crossed, and said the words I had been dreading for 6 months. She said, "Mama, we need our space back. The baby needs a playroom. You'll need to figure something out." And I smiled. I nodded my head like I understood completely, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I even apologized for taking up so much room. I apologized for being a burden. I apologized for existing in the home that my husband and I had paid the down payment for 23 years ago. That smile, it wasn't a happy smile. It was a survival smile. It was the kind of smile you wear when your heart is breaking so fast that your face doesn't know how to catch up. It was the smile of a woman who had spent her whole life keeping the peace, even if it meant tearing herself apart inside. I walked back to my room, my small room at the end of the hall, and I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed that used to be my grandson's crib. I looked at my hands. These old, wrinkled hands. They had cooked thousands of meals. They had held my son when he was a baby. They had washed dishes, planted gardens, and held my husband's hand while he took his last breath. And now they were shaking. Not from age, from fear. From the realization that after 67 years on this earth, after raising a family, after loving so hard, I had nowhere left to go that I didn't cry then. The tears would come later. Right then, I just sat in the silence, listening to the sound of my daughter-in-law's footsteps walking away. She was happy. She had solved her problem. She didn't realize that the problem was me. Let me rewind a little. I need to tell you how I got to that room. To that moment. My name is Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie. Or they used to. Now, I'm just Grandma or Mama. I was married to a man named Robert for 42 years. 42 years. That's longer than some people have been alive. We met when we were just kids, really. I was 19, he was 22. He was a mechanic, greasy hands, and a smile that could light up the whole town. I worked at the local diner, pouring coffee and dreaming of a family. We bought our first house, that house, in 1985. It was a fixer-upper. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and there was a leak in the bathroom. But Robert looked at me and said, "Ellie, this is our piece of the world. We can make it beautiful." And we did. We scraped and saved. We painted every room ourselves. We planted that big oak tree in the front yard when it was just a little twig. That tree is huge now. It shades the whole house. That house is where we brought our son, Mark, home from the hospital. I can still see Robert, so nervous, carrying that little bundle up the front steps. "Careful, careful," I kept saying. He just laughed and said, "I'm holding the future, Ellie. I'm not going to drop the future." We raised Mark in that house. We celebrated birthdays, Christmases, and graduations there. We watched him scrape his knee on the sidewalk out front. We watched him learn to ride a bike right there on the driveway. That house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the keeper of our memories. Robert worked so hard. He worked overtime, weekends, whenever he could. He wanted to make sure Mark had a better life than we did. He wanted to make sure we were secure. He used to tell me, "Ellie, when I'm gone, this house is your rock. It's paid for. No one can ever take it away from you." He said that so many times. The house is yours. It's your safety, and I believed him. I never questioned it. Because when Robert said something, he meant it. He was a man of his word. When Mark grew up and met Sarah, my daughter-in-law, I was so happy. She was beautiful, smart, and ambitious. She came from a family that had a little more money than we did. She was used to nice things. Robert was a little worried. He said, "She's a city girl, Ellie. I hope she likes fixing leaky faucets." But I told him to hush. She made Mark happy, and that was all that mattered. They got married in a small ceremony. We didn't have much to give them for a wedding gift, so Robert and I did the only thing we could. We dipped into our tiny savings, and we helped them with the down payment on their first little apartment. We wanted them to get a good start. That's what parents do. Then life changed. It always does. 5 years ago, Robert got sick. It started with a cough he couldn't shake. Then the tiredness. Then the doctor's appointments. Then the word we were all dreading. Cancer. I won't go into the hard details of those months. They were long and dark. I watched the strongest man I ever knew get smaller and smaller. I held his hand through the pain. I fed him when he couldn't feed himself. I slept in a chair next to his hospital bed at home. Through it all, he held on.
He fought to stay.
One night, near the end, he was lucid. He looked at me with those tired eyes. "Ellie," he whispered, his voice raspy. "You'll be okay. The house, it's all yours. I made sure of it. You stay here. You stay in her home. Don't let anyone take it from you." I squeezed his hand. "I know, honey," I said. "I know. Rest now." He passed away peacefully 3 days later. The world stopped. The color drained out of everything. The house felt so empty. So big. So quiet. The only sounds were the creaks and groans of the house settling, like it was mourning with me. For the first year after Robert died, I was just getting through the days. I would wake up, make coffee for one, and just sit at the kitchen table, staring at his empty chair. I'd talk to him sometimes. I'd tell him about the birds at the feeder or that the oak tree needed trimming. Mark and Sarah would visit on Sundays. They'd come for lunch.
Ide cucruberts favorite recipes, pod ruast, mashaputatuas, apalpia.
I needed to cook for people. It was the only way I knew how to show love. Sarah was polite. She always brought a nice bottle of wine or a bouquet of flowers. But she would look around the house, at the old wallpaper, the worn-out carpet, the dated kitchen. I could see her eyes judging. "Mom," Mark would say gently, you could think about moving somewhere smaller. Something easier to maintain." I'd just shake my head. "This is my home, Mark. It's all I have left of your father." Then, 2 years ago, they came to me with a proposition. Mark sat me down at that same kitchen table. He looked nervous. Sarah sat next to him, her hands folded neatly. "Mom," Mark began, "things are getting really expensive in the city. Rent is just crazy. And we're thinking about starting a family." My heart leaped. A grandchild. The thought of a baby in the house again filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "That's wonderful, honey," I said. Sarah leaned forward. "The thing is, Ellie, we've been looking at houses, and we just can't afford anything decent. The market is impossible." She paused. "But then we had an idea. This house is so big, for just you. It has 3 bedrooms. You're here all alone." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. I knew what was coming. Mark took my hand. "Mom, what if we sold our apartment and moved in here with you? We could fix the place up. Make it nice. We'd be here to help you. And when the baby comes, you'd be right there. You could see them every single day." It sounded so good. A full house again. Laughter.
A baby.
My son, safe at home. I looked around at the quiet walls. I thought about the empty nursery down the hall, the one I had decorated for Mark so long ago. The idea of filling it with life again was intoxicating. "It wouldn't be forever," Sarah added quickly. "A little too quickly. Just until we save up for our own place. And you'd have company. You wouldn't be so lonely." Lonely. That word hit me hard. I was so lonely. The silence at night was deafening. I wanted to be a grandmother. I wanted to be useful. I wanted my family close. My head told me to be careful. This was my sanctuary. This was Robert's promise. But my heart, my lonely, grieving heart, overruled my head. "Okay," I whispered, a smile spreading across my face. "Okay, let's do it." Mark hugged me tight. Sarah smiled, a real smile. For a moment, everything felt perfect. They moved in 3 months later. And at first it was wonderful. The house came alive. There were footsteps, music, the smell of their cooking mixing with mine. Mark fixed the leaky faucet that Robert never got around to. They painted the living room a bright, modern color. Sarah planted flowers in the garden. When the baby came, little Tommy, my heart just melted. I helped with the night feedings. I rocked him to sleep. I sang him the same lullabies I sang to Mark. I was in heaven. I finally felt like I had a purpose again. But slowly, like a cold draft under a door, things began to change. It started with small things, little comments. Mom, you don't need to make such big meals anymore. We're trying to eat healthy, less carbs. Ellie, could you keep Tommy's toys in his room? They're cluttering up the living room. Mom, the TV is a little loud. Sarah has a headache. Ellie, are you using this old armchair? We were thinking of putting a nice new one there. It would really open up the space. I started shrinking. I stayed in my room more. I would wait until they had eaten dinner before I came out to make my own tea. I didn't want to be in the way. The kitchen, which had always been my kingdom, no longer felt like mine. Sarah had rearranged all the cabinets. I couldn't find my own pots and pans. I told myself it was normal. They were a young family. They needed to make the space there. I was just a guest here now. A guest in my own home. Then 6 months ago, the economy got bad. I know Mark and Sarah were feeling the pressure. Groceries went up. Gas went up. They started to argue more. I would hear them late at night, their voices muffled through the walls. One night, I overheard Sarah. She was crying. We can't afford daycare, Mark. It's half my paycheck. We're never going to get out of here. We're never going to have our own life. Mark shushed her. I know. We'll figure it out. But the tension stayed. It hung in the air like smoke. Sarah started looking at me differently. I wasn't the helpful grandma anymore. I was another mouth to feed, another person using the bathroom, another obstacle to their future. Then, Tommy turned 2. He needed space to run. He needed a playroom. And the only room left in the house that wasn't being used for the family was mine. That's when Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway that morning. That's when she told me to leave, that I didn't leave that day. I couldn't. Where would I go? I stayed in my room for 3 days. I only came out late at night to use the bathroom or get a glass of water. I could hear them talking about me. Sarah's voice was sharp. Mark's voice was quieter, trying to reason. I felt like a ghost haunting my own family. On the 3rd night, I heard Sarah say something that cut right through me. She has options, Mark. She could go to a retirement community. She could live with her sister. She's choosing to be difficult. This is our life. Your son's life. Why does she get to decide? Why did I get to decide? It was my house. The next morning, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter. It was addressed to me in Mark's handwriting. Inside was a list of assisted living facilities. Some were nice. Some were cheap. At the bottom, there was a note. It said, Mom, we can help you look at these. Let's talk tonight. I love you. Mark, he loved me. He loved me, but he was trying to send me away. I sat down at the table, the list trembling in my hands. I felt so broken, so worthless. All those years of cooking and cleaning and loving, all those sacrifices. And this was where it ended, with a list of places to put me until I died. And then, I remembered Robert's words. The house is yours. It's your safety. I hadn't thought about the legal side of it. Robert had always handled the bills, the paperwork. After he died, everything was just there. I paid the property taxes from our joint savings. I never questioned the ownership. But suddenly I needed to know. I needed to hear Robert's voice, to feel his promise was real. I went to the old filing cabinet in the corner of my room. The one full of yellowed receipts, warranties for appliances that died years ago, and old photo albums. I dug through it for an hour. And at the very back, I found a thick manila folder. It was marked, in Robert's handwriting, Last Will and Testament / House Deed. I opened it with shaking hands. First, I saw the deed. It was a fancy, official document. It had both our names on it. Robert J. Miller and Eleanor F. Miller. Joint tenants with right of survivorship. I knew what that meant. It meant when one of us died, the house automatically became the other's. It was mine. Legally, it was all mine. Then I pulled out the will. It was thin, just a few pages. Robert had made it years ago, after a friend of his died suddenly and left his family with a big mess. He wanted to be organized. I started to read. It was all standard stuff. He left his small life insurance policy to Mark. He left his tools to a friend. And then I got to the paragraph about the house. The words swam before my eyes. I had to read them 3 times before my brain would accept them. It said, I give, devise, and bequeath my interest in the residential property located at 214 Maple Avenue to my son, Mark Robert Miller, absolutely and forever. If my wife, Eleanor, survives me, she shall have the right to reside in said property for as long as she desires, with all expenses to be paid from the residue of my estate. I stared at the paper.
I read it again.
It didn't make sense. It said he was giving the house to Mark. Not to me, to Mark. I get to live here as long as I want, but it's not my house. It's Mark's house. Robert hadn't left me the house. He had left me a room. He had left me permission to stay. He had made our son the owner. I felt the floor drop out from under me. The promise he whispered on his deathbed, the house is yours, it was a lie. Or maybe he forgot. Maybe in the pain and the medication, he forgot what he had signed on a piece of paper years before. Maybe he thought that giving it to Mark was the same as giving it to me. He trusted Mark. He loved Mark. But Robert didn't know about Sarah. He didn't know about the tension, the arguments, the list of homes on my kitchen counter. He thought he was protecting us both. Instead, he had given my son the keys to my prison. I didn't confront them. Not then. I couldn't. I was too shocked. Too hurt. I just put the papers back in the folder and slid it under my bed. I felt like a trespasser. For 2 years, I had thought I was the host, the matriarch, the owner of this home. But I was just a tenant whose landlord wanted her to move out. The next day, I changed. I became quiet. I agreed with everything. When Sarah complained about the noise, I apologized. When Mark asked if I had looked at the list, I said, not yet, honey. Soon. I was paralyzed. Where was my power? I had no power. A week later, it all came to a head. I was in the kitchen, making myself a simple sandwich for lunch. Sarah came in with Tommy on her hip. She looked at the bread, the butter, the slice of ham. Ellie, she said, her voice tight. That's the last of the ham. I was going to make a sandwich for Mark's lunch tomorrow. I froze, the knife in my hand. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I didn't know. I can just have peanut butter. She sighed, a heavy, dramatic sigh. It's not just the ham, Ellie. It's everything. It's the electric bill. It's the water. We're paying for everything now, and I'm tired. I put the knife down. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, but a tiny spark of self-respect. Sarah, I said, my voice soft but steady. I pay for my own food, and I gave Mark $500 last month to help with the bills. She shifted Tommy to her other hip. $500 doesn't go very far these days. And frankly, Ellie, this situation isn't working. We can't live like this. Mark and I need our own life. We can't move forward with you here. There it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud. This is my home, Sarah. I said, the words feeling hollow now. Sarah's eyes flashed. She walked over to a drawer and pulled out a folder of her own. She opened it and thrust a piece of paper at me. It was a copy of Robert's will. We didn't want to do this, Ellie, she said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. We wanted you to leave with your dignity. But you're forcing our hand. The house belongs to Mark. It's legally his. And we are asking you, as the owners, to leave. We'll help you find a place, but you need to go. The room spun. They knew. They knew all along. They knew the house was Mark's. They had a copy of the will. They had let me believe I was the owner, the helpful grandmother. But they knew. Every time I deferred to them, every time I shrank into my room, they knew they held all the cards. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Sarah. I didn't see my daughter-in-law. I saw a stranger who had played a very long game. Where is Mark? I whispered.
He's at work, she said.
But he agrees. We talked about it last night. It's for the best.
For Tommy.
For our marriage. I felt the tears finally come. Not for me, but for my son. My boy who couldn't even look me in the eye to tell me himself. He sent his wife to do it. He hid behind her and behind a piece of paper his father had signed. I left the kitchen. I walked down the hall to my room. I passed the walls full of photos. Mark's school pictures, our wedding photo, a picture of Robert holding a giant fish he caught. My whole life, hanging on the walls of a house that was no longer mine. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the rain start to fall outside. I thought about Robert. I wasn't angry at him anymore. He was a simple man. He probably thought he was doing the right thing, avoiding taxes or probate or whatever his lawyer told him. He trusted Mark to take care of me. He couldn't have imagined this. I thought about Mark, my baby boy. He was weak. He always had been. He loved Sarah, and he wanted to keep her happy, even if it meant breaking his mother. I felt a deep, profound sadness for him. He was losing his soul, one decision at a time. And I thought about myself. All my life, I had been a giver. I gave my youth to Robert. I gave my energy to Mark. I gave my home to their family. I gave in to keep the peace. I had smiled when I should have screamed. I had apologized when I should have stood my ground. And what did I have left? A room, a suitcase, and a memory of a promise. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to get a lawyer. I wasn't going to make them evict their own mother. The shame of that would be worse than leaving. The love I had for Mark, even now, was too deep to let that happen. But I wasn't going to crawl away with nothing, either. I was going to leave with my head held high. I got dressed. I put on my best dress, the blue one Robert always liked. I put on a little lipstick. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw an old woman, but I also saw strength in her eyes. Strength she didn't know she had. I went into the kitchen. Mark was there, alone. He was sitting at the table, his head in his hands. He looked up when I came in. His eyes were red. He looked like a lost little boy. "Mom," he started, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said. I held up my hand to stop him. "Mark, I don't want to hear what Sarah said. I want to hear what you say." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just looked at me, helpless. I sighed. I walked over to the table and sat down across from him. "I'm not going to fight you," I said calmly. "I'm not going to make this ugly. I'm your mother, and I love you. That will never change, no matter what." Tears started rolling down his cheeks. "But I need you to listen to me," I continued. "Your father left this house to you because he trusted you. He trusted you to do the right thing. He trusted you to take care of me. He didn't just give you a house. He gave you a responsibility. It was a test of your character." Mark sobbed, putting his head back in his hands. "I know, Mom. I know. I failed. I failed you both." "Yes," I said softly. "You did. You chose comfort over honor. You chose your wife over your mother's dignity. And that is a heavy thing to carry. It will weigh on you for the rest of your life." I reached across the table and took his hand. "But I forgive you. I have to. I'm your mother. Just like your father would forgive you. We don't have a choice. That's what love is." He looked up at me, shocked. "You forgive me." "I do," I said. "But I'm not going to stay here. Not anymore. I can't live in a house where I'm not wanted. It would poison whatever love we have left. So I'll go. But I'm not going to one of those homes on your list. I'm going to go stay with my sister, Betty, for a while. She's been alone since her husband passed. Maybe we can be alone together." "Mom, no, you don't have to." "I do, Mark. I need to. For me." Just then, Sarah walked in. She saw us holding hands. She saw Mark crying. She looked at me, her expression guarded. I stood up. I looked her right in the eyes. "Sarah," I said, "I'm leaving today. You'll have your playroom." She blinked, surprised. She didn't expect me to give in so easily. "But I want you to know something," I added, my voice quiet but firm. "This house has a lot of love in its walls. A lot of history. A lot of memories. It was built on sacrifice. I hope you and Mark can fill it with your own happiness. But remember this, a house is not a home if you have to push someone out to feel comfortable in it." She didn't say anything. She just stared at me. I turned and walked back to my room. I packed one old suitcase. Just the essentials. A few photos of Robert, my good Bible, a sweater he used to wear. I left the rest. The dishes, the furniture, the linens, they were all part of the house now. Part of their life. Mark helped me carry my suitcase to the car. The rain had stopped. The sun was trying to peek through the clouds. He hugged me so tight, I thought he might break. "I'll call you, Mom. I'll come visit. I promise." I nodded. I knew he would try. But I also knew things would never be the same. He had drawn a line, and I had crossed over it. I got in my old car and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I couldn't. I just focused on the road ahead. That was 3 years ago. I'm 70 years old now. I live with my sister, Betty, in a little 2-bedroom cottage on the other side of town. It's small. The kitchen is tiny. But it's ours. Betty and I have become closer than we've been in decades. We drink our coffee together every morning on the porch. We watch the birds. We tend to her little vegetable garden. We laugh about silly things that happened when we were girls. We cry sometimes, too, about the people we've lost. But we cry together. There's no loneliness here, just peace. Mark does call. He comes to visit every few weeks, usually alone. Sarah and Tommy come on holidays for an hour or two. It's polite. It's cordial. The wound is still there, but it's healing. We're building a new kind of relationship, one based on distance and respect, rather than proximity and resentment. Last Christmas, Mark gave me a small box. Inside was a key. He looked at me, his eyes full of the old guilt. "It's not for the house, Mom," he said quickly. "It's for my heart. You always have a key to that. I'm sorry it took me so long to give it to you. That meant more than any apology ever could." I still think about Robert. I don't blame him anymore. He did what he thought was best with the tools he had. He loved us. His mistake was believing that a piece of paper could protect the people he loved. He forgot that love needs to be spoken, renewed, and fought for. He left me a house on paper, but he forgot to tell our son to keep me in it. The lesson I've learned, sitting here on this quiet porch with Betty, is a simple one. You can spend your whole life building a home for other people. You can pour your heart into 4 walls, into a family, into a future. But at the end of the day, the only home you can really count on is the one you carry inside you. The home of your own worth. The home of knowing you did your best, you loved with all your heart, and you can walk away with your head held high, even when your hands are empty. My hands aren't empty, though. They're full of memories. They're full of the love I gave and, in some small way, the love I still receive. And they're full of the quiet strength I found when I finally stopped smiling to keep the peace and started living to keep my soul. So, if you're listening to my story and you feel like you're shrinking in your own life, remember me. Remember that it's okay to leave. It's okay to start over. It's never too late to find your own little piece of the world, even if it's just a porch.